Okay, good morning, everybody. We're recording this so that we can share it later for those that can't attend. My name is Christopher Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of the West Monroe, West Washita Chamber of Commerce, and we are so excited today to start the first in our, oh my goodness, I'm going to screw up. Did we say a 4-part series or it's a summer series?
Yeah, a summer series.
Okay, we're going to be vague. We're going to say a summer series. And we're partnered with our good friend Lyla Corkern. She's at Finding Solace. And I have to read this because it's so well written. Props to my friend. So Lyla Corkern is the owner of Finding Solace, a private counseling agency in West Monroe. In this workshop, she's going to leverage her 12 years of experience in mental health, 8 years in business management, and recent graduation from the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program to help us increase our awareness and understanding of how we are doing currently and recognize expectations of life and stress since things changed from the pandemic. You know, this whole dialogue started as kind of an outreach of we know people are still kind of having some stressors, and everybody's topic is workforce. How do we retain those critical employees? How do we recruit those critical employees? But it all starts with understanding stress, understanding what the dynamic has changed since COVID, and so much more. So thank you, Lyla, for lending us your talents. Thank you for lending us your expertise. And hey, before we end at the end, we'll have a little discussion about the rest of the series, right? And hopefully you guys will all enjoy that as well. So no more talking from Christopher. Take it away, Miss Corkern.
Hi, guys. So I will say that I am much more engaging in person. So I'm winging it with the Google Slides this morning. So bear with me. And the more faces I see, the more I can feed off of you. So I understand with everybody's different setups this morning that you might not be able to be on video, but I would love to be able to engage with your faces and conversation. So feel free to chime in whenever you can. A little bit, let me share my screen real quick. Again, let's see if it works. Okay, good. Can you see it? Okay, good.
All good for us.
Okay. So for starters, who am I and why do I have the right to be speaking about this, right? So I became a counselor in 2010. I always knew I wanted to be a counselor. I really wanted to be able to see people differently. I wanted to see there must be more going on than what meets the eye. And I wanted to know more about why people do what they do. I love connecting with other people, and I love, especially now through business growth, I love connecting with other business leaders, especially in this area, to see how we can grow the community and grow each other. And I love all of that. In 2014, I started Finding Solace. The goal was to have a place where I call it the haven for the island of misfit toys, right? It's a haven for the people that feel like they don't fit anywhere else. It's a place. I'm glad somebody chuckled, because like I'm always afraid I'm dating myself with that reference of the island of misfit toys. But I wanted somewhere where the second you walk in the door, you're seen as a person, not as a client, not as an appointment, not as revenue, but you're seen as an actual person. And I think that that's gone a long way in business, in our success. And so with that, there was natural growth over the years. And we just kind of figured it out as we went along. I opened Finding Solace to work for myself and kind of by myself. And then life had other plans and business had other plans. So we grew and grew and grew. And then I had to learn what being a manager was and what leading people was, and what that looked like, and how do you balance being a counselor and wanting to advocate for the person, but also being a manager and having to advocate for your business at the same time, because they don't always have the same answer. So we just winged it for a really long time, and we just kind of did stuff and said yes and figured it out later. In 2020, though, as we all know, everything changed, right? In our office, that looked like going to telehealth overnight. All of my admin had to have computer setups at home, and then all of my clinicians had to have setups at home to start doing telehealth immediately. We didn't have the I guess, advantage that some people had, and I understand from a business perspective, it's a disadvantage, but we couldn't wait that week, that first week of being at home to kind of figure it out, because all of our clients were going through everything that we were going through, right? They were losing their jobs, they were losing their livelihoods, they were losing their schools, they were losing, all their life was upended. So we had to kind of rise to the occasion. In that, though, in business, I had to learn how to manage and lead remotely, which was a huge growing pain, but it was honestly probably our most pivotal moment of growth, because I quit putting my hand in everything. I quit trying to involve myself in everything. I started realizing how many times I answered the same question, or started realizing how many times I had to tend to the same theme of issue. And so from that, we could set up a bunch of operating procedures so that we could put everything in writing. And so when people ask me a question, from that point on, I could go, you have the handbook, or you have the procedure manual, or you have whatever, and put the ball back in their court. And it changed the communication and the functionality and even efficiency of the office. So from then, with having those procedures in place, we didn't have to wing it anymore. We also hired a director of operations, because I realized I was caught up in day to day. I was caught up in who's coming to work, who's not coming to work, who's filling in for who has to cancel whose day, whatever. And that was the amount of time I was putting into that. I could be putting into new contracts, new partnerships, and much more return on investment items. And so it was worth hiring someone to handle all of that for me. I started working also in roundtables. I started working on leadership. I started doing roundtables. I did the Systems of Integrated Growth program through LED. And that one is a really great, if you have a specific pain point, whether it's marketing or I'm trying to think, the legality of things, or HR, they help you identify your issues, and then they kind of bring in a team of experts to come around you, and they teach you things. So that was super helpful. But then in 2021, last year, I think the doors flew open on mental health, because people finally realized that not only that COVID was causing a mental health crisis, but that there was already a mental health crisis that COVID gave us an excuse to do something about. So through that, we had crazy amount of growth very quickly. I also, the second part of last year, did the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. For those that haven't heard of it, it's almost like a mini MBA. It's 20 hours a week for 4 months. It's completely free. So wonderful. If you haven't done it or heard about it, you need to look it up. I can connect you with all of that information. But you walk away from that program with a 5-year growth plan, and it's fine-tuned all of your current operating procedures. So with all of that work and the work from the previous year, we increased our revenue 72% last year. And so it was remarkable. It was insane. But at some point at the end of that, graduating Goldman Sachs, I said, okay, there's a gap in business now. There's the wave of business is changing, and it's not about old school where you get a job and you stick it out for 20 years. That's not. And the boss isn't like a boss, I believe, is going to be a outdated word at some point, because the idea of a boss is the guy that comes in and bosses you around and tells you what to do. There's a reason bossing you around is a term, right? People want leaders and collaborators and partners, and that's a whole conversation for a different day. But I think there's a gap in business where mental health and business need to come together, because I think business is rooted in people. And if your people aren't healthy, functional, served, seen, supported, all of that, then your business can't thrive. I think everyone is finally seeing that they have options, and also that they have passions. When we all went to the house in 2020, we all said, hey, I kind of like making t-shirts out of my house, or hey, I kind of like doing embroidery, or I like building things, or whatever. And now everybody can have a business. And so everybody has a lot more options than what they felt like they used to. And so now it's time to be able to rise to that occasion and serve all of those different interests that your employees might have. And so the long and short is, from all of that, from the mental health side, and then all the business education I've had now, I want to kind of meld the worlds together to help all the business leaders, or the people that want to be leaders in business, to be able to grow and have all the tools in their tool belt to be able to do that well. Okay. So everybody's sick of talking about it, but let's talk about COVID. So COVID, mental health, and business. So globally, anxiety and depression, just those two, anxiety and depression went up 25% in 1 year. So it went from 11% of people in the US saying they had anxiety or they were depressed to 42%. 47.5% in Louisiana said that COVID impacted their mental health. The biggest thing I can say about that also is that's just the people that are willing to say it, right? Think of how many people that would go, yeah, that's probably true, but no, I'm fine, which is kind of a bunch of what we're going to talk about today. We're all really sick of talking about the last 2 years. We're all feeling like we're finally getting over it, right? We're finally to the other side. But are we? Is there a over it? Is there a past it? Is there a, okay, COVID's done now? Because I don't think it is. And I'll talk a little bit in a minute about why I think that. The long and short of it is now, though, in the US and here locally in your backyard, from what we've seen right now, I have 20 counselors, and I hear at least once a week of somebody having some issue with self-harm or suicide or whatever. And it comes a lot from people in business leadership, the people managing other people and feeling the weight of that on their shoulders. We have a record number of anxiety and depression locally, kids and adults. And so I think at this point, there's a lot that we have to shape, right? For business leaders, COVID affected operations, revenue, employment. It affected every aspect of your life. In February through April of 2020, almost 4 million small businesses closed their doors. To give you reference, the Great Recession was only 5 million. We were this close. And the Great Recession was over a longer period of time. This was in a 2-month span. We almost did as much as the entire Great Recession. 59% of small business in Louisiana was in danger of closing within 1 month. And 58% of employees faced unemployment. So then you can't help but ask, like, how does that impact the way we see the world and the way we see business and what we know is potentially possible now? It feels like nothing's off the table at this point now. Also, the way businesses are even run is completely different, because there is telehealth, there is working from home, there is the demand for flexibility. There are medical things you have to cater to now that we didn't have before. Okay. So life after COVID, it's kind of a trick question or statement. Is there life after COVID? And I hinted at that earlier. We've lived in a, when you look at 2020 and 2021, you look at what a troubling time that was, right? Well, compared to that, we're great, right? I think most of us would be like, man, compared to that, like, this is a walk in the park. This is easy. But is it? What should we be comparing to? Because if 2020 is a bad example of what to compare it to, and 2021 isn't the best to compare it to, what do we compare it to? Anybody have any thoughts? How do you compare your success or stability right now to what it used to be? Or do you compare to what it used to be? What should you compare it to? How do you define that? How do you measure that?
I think for us, it's a whole new normal. I think it's almost impossible to start comparing some things because the rules have changed. Right. We went from having to have a digital footprint as part of our model to that being the rubric that we measure everything else by. Right. Having to have events in person to having to have a digital component always. It accelerated our use of technology tremendously too.
Right. Absolutely. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. that there's probably nothing to compare it to because we've never lived here before. We've never lived where we have the awareness of what is possible that we do now. We've never lived where we know we can be government mandated to stay in our homes. And so how can we compare it to anything? So I will teach you, don't worry, I will teach you how to measure it for yourself. But I don't think it's a national standard like it used to be. So there's this thing that they talked about with veterans with PTSD, that the struggle with vets and why they have PTSD is they leave this bubble, whether that's the US or where they grew up or their culture or whatever. They leave this bubble and they go to this other place. And that experience is so vastly different. Even if you take, I have a little bit different perspective. My husband's a vet. He was 20 years in the Air Force. And so I've discussed with him that even if you went as a member of military to wherever, Afghanistan, and you stayed in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I don't know if there is one in Afghanistan, but you get my point. Even if you stayed in this really great place and you were catered to and you had no needs and it was this wonderful 3-month vacation, but you knew that outside those walls, everything and everyone wanted you dead. Your life is never the same because that reality changes your reality. That experience changes your reality forever, right? So these veterans go overseas and they experience what life is like totally differently somewhere else. And whether that's watching how other people live or whether that's watching like the impact that it has on them or their experience, whatever, they can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You know what I mean? They can't come back and go, oh, well, let's talk about the Kardashians. Because like, do you know what's going on over there? You know, that sort of thing. And I think that that's where we are now, right? I think now in business, people can say, oh, wow, your books look great. Like your employees seem happy. Like, cool, you're coasting. I don't think any of us believe we're coasting anymore because we know all the other things that are possible. We can't put the toothpaste back in the tube either. We can't move back to a world where it's impossible for the world to shut down. We can't move back to a world where it's impossible to lose our livelihood overnight. That has to change you, right? Considering that, how much would it take for us to be okay, let alone to be good and confident? Okay. Sorry, I get chatty and I forget to use the slides. You can have the slides later if you like. They're just for show, honestly. Okay, so now we're going to get serious. So let's do personally first. I know some of you are driving and stuff like that, so you can have this. I'll send you this assessment later, but I'm going to give you a little quiz. Okay, so for starters, if you had to, and you don't have to tell me, but I want you to think for yourself. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you're doing personally outside of the business? Everybody kind of got a number where you think you're at? Okay. So I'm going to read you one line item at a time. And I want you to mark whether it applies to you or not. Okay. And this isn't clinical. I'm not going to say y'all are depressed. I'm not going to say you have an anxiety disorder, nothing like that. I just want you to kind of be mindful for yourself. Okay. So this is in the last 30 days. Have you had little interest or joy in doing things? And with all of these, I don't mean to the point that it's clinical. I don't mean like, do you have trouble getting out of bed? I'm just saying in general, do you struggle with not being interested in new things? Do you not have as much fun as you used to? Do you feel down, sometimes bummed? Do you feel like you can't fix something? Are there changes to your sleep? Are you sleeping too much or are you not sleeping enough? I hope you're counting because we're gonna tally it and I'm gonna give you a key at the end. So I need you to keep track. Do you feel tired or have little energy? Honestly, the opposite is true too. Do you feel more restless? Do you feel like you have more energy because you have anxiety about things that you need to get done? Do you have changes in appetite? Are you eating more, eating less, hungry more, hungry less? Struggling with self-image or negative self-talk? I give my husband flack for this all the time. He's the first one to go, "Dang it, Anthony," out loud in front of people. And I'm like, well, I think we all have that in our head a little bit, but you don't have to be hollering at yourself in public. Trouble concentrating or getting things done. Changes in behavior. Oh, you're more restless or you're more still. So not even sleepy, you just move less. Feeling anxious, worried, or fearful. Again, that's not to the point of being clinical. I'm not saying, do you have a panic attack? But do you find yourself worrying about things? Do you find yourself stuck in like what if questions in your mind? Feel unable to redirect or stop your thoughts? You feel restless, irritable, high strung, unable to relax? Does your brain ping around? That's what I call it. When your brain kind of feels like a pinball machine, it goes ding, 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 ding. Physical issues. Do you have a racing heartbeat? Do you sweat? Do you shake? Do you feel short of breath? Some people, it's do your hands get or feet get randomly really, really cold? Feeling out of control or like you've lost touch with reality, like feeling ungrounded, right? Feeling like you don't have a firm foundation underneath you. Feeling like life continues to be impacted by chaotic or traumatic events. That feeling like you're always hit by something, like you can't ever get solid ground because something else is always happening and something else is always knocking you over. Feeling like you can't trust other people or feeling like you're alone. That's not just, I mean, it can be alone in life, but it's alone in a situation, alone in a problem, alone in one of your responsibilities. It can be alone in anything. Struggling with anger, even over minor things. Like, do sudden noises make you irritable? Does it startle you or does it make you irritable? You know, could it be little minor, what feels like minor significance, but you can physically have some sort of reaction? Unhappy in your relationships with others and stuck not knowing how to make them better. Again, that could be like you want to keep the bread in the fridge and your partner wants to keep it on the counter. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you're feeling frustrated and unable to solve a problem, that's the biggest overarching thing. You feel stuck and you feel unable to fix something in your relationships. In general, you believe your life would be better if you could figure out how to solve blank. Okay, so from all these, tally up what you think, and then I'm going to give you the key. Okay, if you have more than 3, you're not thriving. I love the faces, like, hey, I didn't want to hear that. If you have more than 5, you're functioning. And if you have more than 7, you're just surviving. I'm not going to make anybody share, but you're welcome to share. Even if you don't want to share your number, share your thoughts about that assessment or that experience.
So Lyla, when you're saying surviving, you're just saying you're just in this context, you're just making it. You're just,
yeah, you're treading water to make it to the next day. It's funny, since I'm a counselor, I'm reading all the body language. And I'm like, don't worry, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to fix it. It's going to be okay. But that's exactly, honestly, what I wanted to have happen, because I wanted to compare how you thought you were doing to what the reality is of how you're doing. Because, and we'll talk about it more of like where that mindset shifted and how that happened, that we all think we're doing really good, but we're not. And that's why we have such a mental health crisis, is because we think we're doing fine and we think we're doing fine. And then all of a sudden, like, the transmission goes out on our whole mental health. And then we have to fix everything because we burn it out, you know? Okay, so functional versus healthy. So that one comment I made about a certain number is functioning. So COVID opened up in our brain this awareness of threats, the unknown, the reality that we don't have as much control over our life as what we thought we did. It opened up the idea of loss. Like you could lose your job, you could lose your business, you could lose your freedom. You know, there's so much of this new reality that came from COVID that can't go away. They won't go away. So now we have to create a new normal, like Chris said earlier. So to survive COVID, most of us just kept putting one foot in front of the other, right? Like when the schools closed, all of us that had school kids, like, okay, well, we just got to figure it out and we got to homeschool and we got to do the next thing. And like, that was a good time, right, guys? Like that was a blast. But then teachers don't get paid enough, side note. But like, we just did the next thing. So then when it was, okay, well, you have to stay home for 2 weeks. Okay, well, that sucks, but I'm going to do that project at the house I never got to do that none of us actually did. Right? None of us cleaned our house like we said we were going to. None of us lost weight like we said we were going to. But we just kept finding the next thing to move forward. We just kept swimming. You know, like that whole Finding Nemo quote of just keep swimming. I love that. Like my family says that all the time as a term of resilience. Like, it's okay, I know you're having a bad day, but let's just keep swimming and let's keep moving forward. However, at some point, does that become problematic? At some point, is that unhealthy to say just keep swimming? Because are you just swimming over all the mess and not fixing anything? Are you skating over whatever the issue is that you're trying to like survive? And so then you don't actually ever fix it. So we functioned, quote unquote, to be able to survive. To preserve our mental health in that moment, we turned ourselves into these machines of like just doing one thing and then the next thing and the next thing. And so we functioned, we got tasks completed, we stayed above water, we grasped at these joyful moments, right? Like you're home with your family or you're home and finally have like alone time. Like for all of us introverts, we got to have like alone time and not have to interact with so many people. We found all these joyful moments, but they were brief moments and there wasn't actually like overarching contentment or happiness. We just lived off one like dopamine dump to the next during COVID. So we were functioning and moving from one task to the next out of necessity and out of obligation and out of routine. And it gave us this false sense that we were actually moving forward when you're kind of on a treadmill running in place and you're not ever really getting anywhere. So then we go to, so what is healthy and what is thriving? Anybody have any thoughts? Anybody have any guesses? What would it take for you to say my mental health is thriving right now?
I guess all of the reverse.
All the reverse, not checking any of those things, right? That's the short answer. Okay. So I cheated because I don't like when people give these like dictionary definitions of things, because I don't think that that's contextual to your real life, right? Like we all live such different lives and have different experiences and perspectives and whatever. I don't think it always applies to everybody. So I cheated and I pulled all 20 counselors and I made note of all the resounding things that they said they felt thriving was. And again, we're still kind of talking personally, and we'll transition to professionally in a second. So personally, thriving is having increased energy and feeling a sense of purpose, having more awareness and enjoyment of the present moment. Not replaying the highlights or the bloopers from yesterday and not spending today anxiously awaiting tomorrow. I really enjoyed that one. Like how many of us replay the highlights and the bloopers in our mind at the end of the day of like, here's the wins and here's the failures at the end of the day. Having peace, clarity, and focus with an ability to handle what comes without reacting emotionally. experiencing positive and fulfilling emotions or a mindset while being able to successfully maneuver through any obstacles presented along the way. Accepting the roles of the negative and the positive in your daily interactions. I found that one really interesting. Accepting and embracing the negative as well as the positive in your life. And not from a, oh, this can be a learning opportunity, kumbaya kind of thought, but as a, like, it's all growth, right? That it's all something that puts you in the next, I don't know, to the next level or to the next thing. It's all something that has the potential to move you forward. Riding the waves of emotions and not allowing thoughts or feelings to overwhelm and lead to reactions instead of responses. I think that's huge fundamentally. Like thriving, having a mental health that is having your mental health thrive means making sure that for 95% of the time you can respond to things and people in your life instead of reacting to things and people in your life. One person was really honest and said, honestly, I'm really scared to thrive. Surviving has been such a constant since 2020. And so in a way, there's comfort in that. It's hard to trust that you can sustain it when you've been in survival mode. A lot of people don't trust the idea of having a thriving mental health because it feels unattainable and it feels fake almost. There's these people that feel like, well, if I'm joyful most of the time, then I'm just in denial about everything around me. Like that could be, but it really could be that you find better balance in how you deal with things. Somebody said, when someone is thriving, their body language is totally different. They physically look lighter and brighter and taller somehow, looking forward to the future with excitement and curiosity instead of dread and anxiety. Working to change the mindset from one of constant pessimism and insecurity to one of curiosity and appreciation. The biggest indicator of someone who thrives is emotional resilience. And I think that, I mean, I still have 3 or 4 more, but I think that says it all. Like the biggest indicator is having resilience emotionally, because your emotions impact your thoughts and your thoughts impact your behavior. And there's this whole loop that you can get stuck in, that you're either going to be spiraling down or you're going to be spiraling up. And it's up to you to choose which direction you turn. So then I put it to you, if that's thriving in life, then what's thriving in business? What's thriving at work? No guesses?
Getting up early, staying late.
What was that? Get up early, stay late. Well, that's probably the old school definition of thriving a business. I don't think it is anymore.
I think thriving is right now is if you feel like your team is connected and that they have a little bit of job satisfaction at a minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to give you another quiz. You loved it the last time. Okay, so let's talk about an assessment for your business or your workplace right now. Let's see if you're thriving. Do the same thing, kind of think in your brain where you think you are on a scale of 1 to 10. And I know now you probably are unsure compared to the last assessment. You're like, well, I thought I was fine. So go with your gut and your first instinct of what you think, and then have like some sort of number 1 to 10 in your head. Okay, you look forward to every day at work. You never have, my rule in my office is no one is allowed to have more than 2 days that they don't want to come to work without talking to me about it. Because by the second day, like everybody's allowed a bad day. Everybody's allowed a bad day. And everybody's allowed, I wish I could stay in bed. I wish I didn't have to fool with you guys. I wish everybody's allowed to have an off day. But by day 2, it's a bigger problem and you need to be talking to me about it so we can fix it. You feel no conflict or tension in your workplace. So there's no drama. You know your culture and your brand. And bonus points, you can define it in the action items that you do, which is a conversation we'll have at another day. But all of your staff are able to display your culture and represent you well. You look forward to each workday. Oh, I was redundant. Sorry. See, slides are not my friend. You know your ideal client or customer, and you know how to reach them. Those are two different things, right? I think that we tend to pigeonhole like this specific 30-year-old white male with 2 kids, whatever, is my target client, and we go after them and we know how to reach them. Or we throw a wide net and go, well, everybody could potentially be my customer. Neither one of those do well in business. And so you're able to define your ideal client or ideal clients, because they might be different, but you can define them well, and you know how to reach them. You have standing operating procedures in place. Bonus points if everyone has access to them, they don't ask you questions about them, and they're already scalable for expansion. You have key metrics in place. So things that you measure every month, every quarter, every year, etc. Bonus points, you know them without having to look them up. Do you know what those measurements are, or do you know what the actual numbers of those measurements are without looking them up? You can be out of work for 3 or 4 weeks without issue. Now, I know that some people work for other people, and so I'm not saying like you have that much PTO, but if you did have that much PTO, you could potentially be gone for 3 or 4 weeks, and you wouldn't have to clean up some sort of mess or crisis when you got back. I see all those faces. I love it. You have a business plan. Bonus points if you have a 5-year growth plan. Your biggest referral source is word of mouth. That most of your clients, customers, partners, whatever, come to you because they've heard about you or your company. Your business is able to give back to the community or back to its customers. You've done a risk analysis of your business in the last 6 months. You believe your staff is motivated and growing, or it can be your team is motivated and growing. And you've developed a partnership or collaboration with another organization or another community network. Bonus points, those people asked you to partner instead of you chasing them. Okay, so I don't have a key for this one because this one is so defined by each of you and your situation. Loosely though, I think hopeful and a potentially really positive work environment or work potential is 10 out of 20. So if you can confidently say, I got 10 out of 20, like you're on the right track. How many of those do you think it would take to be thriving though? To be like, I got it together and actually be able to know that with this new reality and all these other things that could potentially happen, but I got this. It would take a lot of them, right? Any thoughts about that? Any of them like shock you? Any of them that you hadn't considered setting as a goal? Any of them, anything?
Hadn't
Chris,
thought about it.
I was like,
Yeah, I
Chris,
hadn't
I'm
thought
gonna
about
rely on
doing
you to
risk.
come back.
Yeah. I haven't thought about doing risk analysis in the last 6 months because think that really needs to be ongoing. I hadn't thought about that.
Because I think we look, hopefully everyone has kind of done one, right? If you haven't, let's do one. But if you haven't done one in the last 6 months, in 6 months' time, especially in today's business world, it changes so much. So like there's so much new opportunity and there's so much new threat. So, okay. So then how do we get there? Because even if I took that right now, there's things that I need to be more mindful of or to lean into or aspire to and to focus on. So that all of those assessments, the personal and professional one, reflect all the steps to be able to improve, right? They're all just identifying pain points for growth. And so all of those things, and I'm going to plug myself, but I honestly don't care who you consult with as long as you consult with somebody. All of those things are things that are improvable. And so there's nothing that's like wave a magic wand and you, in order to be able to make it happen, because you have no power to create that. So to thrive, we have to work in a place where we're getting proactive instead of reactive, like we talked about earlier. So first and foremost, it's being aware. I think that there's new awareness that you have right now that you didn't have coming into this based on how you are doing personally and professionally. So being willing to see it, being willing to face it, accept that you aren't where you want to be. You can't do anything unless you like own that piece of it. Okay, review. Decide what moves or changes you want to make. Review all those pain points and see what is the most pivotal in you being able to grow. Make decisions and changes based on where you want to be in 5 years or where you want to be, what decision you want to make if you were 5 times as big as you are now. So like when you're making hiring decisions, when you're making expensing decisions, or when you're creating a new policy or procedure, if you make a policy or procedure for where you are right now, it might not serve you when you've doubled and tripled in size. And so like that's in my office, it's if we tell all the counselors, hey, for this thing, you need to tell reception. Well, that's fine. But if I have 100 counselors one day, if that's possible, if I had 100 counselors one day, that's a lot of messages going to reception. So that's probably not something I need to set up. So making sure that you're optimizing yourself for longevity and for growth. Research. Whether you research independently or you are taught or you join a collaborative group, like learn how to grow where you want to grow. So if you want to grow personally, like find out if that's something you want to do on your own or if you want a support team for that. If you want to learn about business, find out what you want to learn about business and consult with the right people to be able to find the right resources for that, which goes in tandem with the next one, consult. Utilize your support system. So personally, identify the people that are safe, that know you well, that have your best interest at heart, and actually do all those things. They don't just say they do, right? You have, and then from business and from your work environment, find the people that you trust to look out for you and to look out for the company or look out for the organization and ask them what they think. Or ask them where they have resources that would be helpful. If you look at your personal support system or your professional support system and you can't explicitly trust them, explicitly, like, so if you have a CPA or a bookkeeper and you kind of have this little 5% that you're like, oh, but do they know what they're talking about? Or, oh, are they doing what they say they're doing? Or if you have a marketing person that you think is winging it, or if you have network connections and partnerships where you're carrying the load, you have to make a change. Because even that 5% of brain capacity that's wondering about this thing or this thing is 5% you could be putting somewhere else. And so I know we live in a small town and we tend to make relationships based on personal relationships. And so then we don't want to hurt feelings. We don't want to burn bridges, but at some point it's business. And so you give them the opportunity to step up and make whatever change you need. And if they don't, you got to go, or they got to go, depending on the situation. But you aren't doing yourself or them a favor by staying in an unhelpful relationship. Okay. And then execute. You've reviewed your pain points. You've considered what you want to learn. You've consulted with other people. You've found some good opportunities. So then pull the trigger, create the change that you want to have. So if you've been sitting on the fence of should I hire somebody, should I not, pull the trigger. The best advice I ever got from Goldman Sachs, like, was one of the briefest things. And they said, hire before you need somebody. They said hire before you need somebody, but they said hire slow and fire fast. Like, put a job listing out before you're at crunch time and you need somebody yesterday, so that then you have the candidates and you can take the time to invest and scan these potential candidates in more depth and about them as a person, and not just can they work Excel, right? Because a lot of people can work Excel or can learn to work Excel, but if they can't fit in your company culture and your brand and your value system, they're a wasted investment, right? So you hire slow, but then the second somebody is like, yeah, on the fence, and you say, okay, here's our culture, here's our values, here's the action plan that I need from you, and they don't rise to that, they got to go, and you got to hire somebody else. Because again, you're wasting all of that mental capacity on them instead of on growth. Adapt. I probably can't talk enough about that, but that is business today, adaptability. And so whether that's allowing people different kind of flexible benefits, whether that's allowing them to work from home, whether that's changing your marketing model overnight, whether it's staying mindful of new technology and issuing changes all the time, whether that's the contracts you have with the state or the federal government and they have changing decisions all the time. Like, we just know now that you have to be flexible to be a leader in business. And so if you're not flexible, you either have to do some stretches and figure it out, or you're going to have to like make a decision about if this is a good line of work for you or not. Because you have to be adaptable. People get to be people first now and employees second. And if that doesn't serve your way of thinking, it's going to be really hard to be a leader. Self-care. I love talking about self-care because everybody thinks it's a bubble bath and a walk and a quiet night watching TV. But true self-care is an activity that regenerates your energy. So think of the thing that you typically think is self-care. So for me, my first thought is like every night I love trash television. Just garbage television, like Real Housewives, all the ridiculousness, right? But I also know that's not self-care. I love that to dissociate from the stress of the day. I love that to like check out of all the things and all the to-do lists, but it doesn't actually serve me. My test for if something is self-care or not is if you did that activity that you consider to be self-care for as long as you can do it, do you walk away from that feeling energized and excited, or do you walk away feeling lethargic and fatigued? Because if it's lethargic and fatigued, it's probably something that lets you dissociate and lets you escape. It's not something that actually helps you and makes you better. If I spent a whole day watching Real Housewives, I would feel like a steamy pile of garbage. But if I reorganized and cleaned my house, I would feel tired, but I would feel pumped to attack whatever's next. So I think self-care isn't always what we think it is. And the last one is stay open. Stay open-minded to anything. There is no business model that is like the right answer. There is no ABC. There is no 1, 2, 3. Everybody has something of value to share with you. Everybody has some perspective or experience or idea that has value. And so whether that's staying open to the team around you or the team that works for you, or whether that's staying open to ideas in education and pursuing these more like these new avenues for growth and things, or whether it's just staying open-minded to what might fall in your lap. You got to stay open, and it goes right there with being flexible and adaptable. All right, that's it. Any questions? Any thoughts?
So I want, when you're thinking introspectively about yourself and your own business,
Mhm.
you know, in exploring Goldman Sachs program and everything else, from a year ago to now, how would you have answered some of those questions on your thriving for yourself differently?
I don't think so. Like, and I'll just say, because 2021 was so many things, but mainly Goldman Sachs, but it was so many things.
Right.
2020, I probably, well, let me cheat and pull it back up because I don't even know. In 2020, I probably would have said yes to maybe 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know some of these were attainable. The idea of being gone for 3 or 4 weeks without issue, I thought the whole place would burn down. I thought it would just spontaneously combust if I left. And like everybody would hate each other and nothing would get done and we would never pay our bills and all the things. But I actually learned a lot about, and it goes to several different points on this assessment, that the more I got out of the way, the better the business was. So like, instead of me panicking about, well, what was our revenue this month? And what was our, like, how many clients do we have? And what was our, whatever, when I grasp at them, it doesn't actually do anything and it's not productive, but the key metrics part, so that I know exactly what we track every week and what we track every month and what we track every quarter and whatever. I have so much peace of mind about it because we would see the writing on the wall way ahead of the curve for certain things. Like there's stuff you can't predict, but yeah, there's just a lot that I didn't even know was possible. I've never had a business plan until Goldman Sachs, let alone a growth plan. I was just winging it. And so I lived in a lot of anxiety that I didn't know I was living in. Like, I think on the other side of it, I kind of went, oh, it can be like this. Like I don't have to worry about like my baby all the time. Like, it's amazing.
Because you've addressed it, you feel empowered
Right.
to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Very introspective. Any other questions?
I know that this is a very overarching conversation, and I wanted to be able to go into much more of the tangible, like action items, how to grow, how to improve. But I think that's where none of that can happen unless you have the awareness of like what needs to change. And so we had to have this one first. But that's where Chris and I were talking about, like, this needs to be a series, right? So we are going to have a summer series, and I'm going to be able to dive into more specifics of each of the different things. So some of the topics that will be addressed in some way, shape, or form, defining your culture, because that's the basis of new business success. And that doesn't mean like, well, we help people, or we're the best at this, or like your culture is defined much more specifically. And once you define it more specifically, your whole standard operating procedures can be revamped to serve that culture. And then it changes so many different things. Branding that culture to boost sales, but also to improve workforce. Make your culture work for you. It changes HR conversations. Like now when there's like a mess, if it's, this hasn't happened, but if one of my staff came in and said, so-and-so is late every day, I would say, well, our number one cultural value is unconditional positive regard. So have you spoken to them and asked if they're okay? Because if you haven't, I don't want you complaining to me. You know, like if you haven't leaned in to try to serve or see what else is possible, like we're not going to be negative about other people, because that's not what we do here. And it changes the conversation. Increasing value by increasing worth. That's all about inclusivity. If you give your team more worth and you value them more, your business innately grows. Like it can't help but grow, right? Getting drama out of the workplace, talked about that a little. Managing people, like moving from reactive to proactive approaches and managing people. Support systems in business. How do you find them? How do you create them? How do you define them? Knowing your numbers for peace of mind. That goes back to the matrix thing. Like, what numbers should you be tracking? And then communication with clients and customers, your direct and your indirect communication. Sometimes, what are you saying to your clients or customers when you don't say anything? So I think that's, and then for anybody interested, like I love having one-on-ones about your situation or your team or your staff about like, here's my pain point and how can we work to improve that. So if that's something anybody ever wants, please reach out to me, because that's my jam. It's like counseling for business. It's wonderful.
Well, number one, we'll be reaching out to you to start that process for sure. Hey, I know that we have to be cognizant of time. It's 9:29, and we thank you, Lyla, for sharing again your expertise, your talent. This is obviously the beginning of a larger conversation, as she alluded to, and we will be sure to post that series on our website, and you'll be able to register. We're looking at making that an in-person event since things are kind of changing, and providing lunch. So be looking for that coming in the coming about a week or so. Don't you think, Lyla, we'll have it fleshed out?
Yeah, easy.
And so thank you again for joining us. The Small Business Development Series is a monthly series, and we are excited to launch this first in an addressing of mental health and business needs. So if you have any questions, we'll share Lyla's contact information so you can make that direct in the presentation that she offered today to kind of mentally cue some of that dialogue to continue happening. Thanks again for joining us. And hey, we'll look forward to seeing you next time, and maybe in person. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.